Welcome
Shalom.
to
Shalom, shalom.
Welcome.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Okay, let's get started. The 7 days of creation. This study is another examination of the first day of creation, specifically verses 1 and 2. What you see here is creation in verse 1. 1, 2, 3, and 4 parts is what happened in verse 1. In the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth. Genesis 1. Are you ready? Now this slide is just to explain, instead of seeing the word day, I like to use the word cycle because we've had a lot of problems with people confusing the word day, whether it's 12 or 24 hours. So to avoid that confusion, I go with the word cycle. And that word cycle, you'll see here, is I specifically designates 24 hours. And it has the two seasons, which are the light, H216, and the night, 3915. The 24-hour cycle is further defined to pinpoint the two seasons. They are the seasons H6256F, and they have 12 segments of time, whether it is the light season or the night season. And here's some words from Jeremiah 33, 20 to 26. Thus saith Yahuah, if you can break my covenant of the day and my covenant of the night, that there should not be day and night in their season, then may also my covenant be broken with David my servant. Verse 25 goes on to confirm Yahuah has a covenant of the day and the night. This would be the day season and the night season. Day season has light from the sun in the sky, and night season has no light from the sun in the sky. These are the sources, or most of the sources, that I've used in this study. I just want to outline them here so that you can see what basically where I'm coming from. I would like to point out these two sources here do not use the Masoretic text, so they have not been tainted. I appreciate these lexicons a lot. You'll notice the dates that they were written over here. Very, very, very valuable lexicons. Okay, let's get started. In the beginning, Elohim created. He created the heaven and the earth. And Isaiah 11:12 says, and he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The light and the life, John 1:1-3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. He was in the beginning with Elohim. All came to be through him, and without him not even one came to be that came to be. And I want you to notice this line, he was in the beginning with Elohim. He was there. Yahusha, the light, John 1:4-5. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Yahusha, the life and the light, was the initiating power behind the creation of this earth. When Yahusha arrived on the scene of our future earth, simply put, light was. This light simply existed, Hayah. Exodus 3:14. And Elohim said to Moshe, I am that I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. The Hebrew text reads, Eyeh asher eyeh. The word Eyeh being derived from Hayah, which means to be, to exist. But the Aramaic text here in verse 14 reads, Ayah asher ayah. This is not his name, but it is an explanation that leads up to the revelation of his name in verse 15, namely Yahuah. The light radiating from Yahusha was the first visual light on the scene of creation. Genesis 1 explains exactly what was created on that first light season. How do we know this light was a physical, visual light as well as spiritual? Remember, Moses went up onto Mount Sinai to commune with our Creator. When Moses came back down to the Hebrew people, he needed to cover his brilliantly glowing face to keep from harming the people who looked at him. In Earth's premier light season provided by Yahusha, what was the very first recorded event of creation? Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, Elohim created, and that word created, the Hebrew word is bara, the heaven and the earth. Is there anything that can be excluded, left out, or not accounted for in the creation event by the words heavens and earth? No, this is an all-inclusive, complete statement that encompasses our complete universe. A closer look at the Hebrew word bara reveals a much deeper revelation. Brown Driver Briggs Lexicon. Charlene, do you want to read that?
Yes, I will read it. We're going to be starting some definitions with all of these resources. So we're going to look at the word created or bara first. And I would just like you to just kind of buckle down, and this is going to be heavy, all of these definitions. But for created, Brown Driver Briggs, he says, to create, to shape, and to form. The call verb form is to shape, to fashion, and to create. It is used of heaven and earth. That is in Genesis 1, verse 1. And then it is used of individual man, this bara, in Genesis 1:27. And it's used of new conditions and circumstances. But we want you to note that after day number 1 of creation, the next usage of bara after Genesis 1:1 is not found until Genesis 1, verse 21, when the birds and the fish are created on cycle number 5. It is also used of transformations, but that is not applicable to this study. So what we want you to understand here is that the word bara is given in verse 1. This is created, and it does not show up again. This word does not show up again until the 5th cycle in Genesis 1:27.
Thank you, Charlene.
So just to make sure that we understand, you're saying that the word for creating, bara, created, is 3 times in the Genesis 1 narrative. So that would not apply to words like he made. That would be a different word.
Yes, and we're going to be looking in detail at that.
Okay.
Study tools help define bara. The Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language by Ernest Klein. Created, to create, to found, to build, to bear a child. And the Hebrew Lexicon by John Parkhurst. And I've already mentioned this one does not use the Masoretic vowel points. Bara denotes the production of either substance or form, the creation or accretion of substance or matter. To produce, or to create, produce into being. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, the Elohim created the heavens and the earth. I'm not going to read these two ones. You can read them at another time when you go over it yourself, over the studies. It's available to you. I've continued with Parkhurst. To form by accretion or concretion of matter. Genesis 1:21. So the Elohim, Yahusha, formed the great aquatic monsters, no doubt of pre-existent matter, pre-existent from the first cycle of creation. And verse 27, bara, created, formed man and male and female. Most people are not familiar with the word accretion. We're going to look in the New Webster's Encyclopedic Dictionary and find out what it says. Accretion, the act of accreting or accressing. Was this on, or I want you to ask yourself, this action, is it going to be on purpose or is it just something that was haphazardly happened? A growing to, an increase by natural growth, an increase by an accession of parts naturally separate, a growing together of parts naturally separate, as the fingers or toes, the thing added by growth, an accession. With Parkhurst, there is no allowance for the newly created earth to be without form and void. Every elemental substance that was needed to continue to fashion and create in order to purposely form this universe was brought forth at the first act of creation. Let's read Isaiah 45:18. For thus saith Yahuah that created the heavens, Yahuah himself that formed the earth and made it, he hath established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahuah, and there is none else. So this word, or these phrases, not in vain, and he formed it to be inhabited, are going to become extremely important further along in this study. How do we understand this? Understanding accretion. For example, a tree was not standing with leaves, yet the elements that required assembly for a tree to grow, accretion, were brought forth into the localized area. The final assembly and the subsequent growth had yet to be accomplished. Our universe was yet without final form. Genesis 2:4-6. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created in the day Yahuah Elohim made the earth and the heavens. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For Yahuah Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. When I'm talking about this tree was not standing with leaves, it's kind of like when we go out into our garden and we take just a single pea and we plant the pea in the ground. That is the basic elemental structure that is needed to bring forth the plant that's going to grow above the ground up on your vine and produce the vegetables, the peas and the pods. And that's the way this earth was created. The very basic elemental substances that needed to be brought together were all created on the very first day. Barker's Hebrew Lexicon. Bara, create, to concrete, form anew by concretion, to create, choose. Concretion is a different word than the definition of concretion. What is the meaning of concretion? Webster's Encyclopedia Dictionary again. Concretion, the act of concreting or growing together so as to form one mass. The mass, or solid matter, formed by growing together. A clot, a lump or nodule formed by molecular aggregation as distinct from crystallization. This is an allowance for an elemental substance accumulation ready for final formation of this earth into one inhabitable unit. And this is the lexicon translated by Edward Robinson, and it is originally from William Gesenius. Bara, create, shape, create, form, fashion by cutting, shape out, pair a reed for writing, a stick for an arrow, but also create, found, build, beget. Now notice this, a change of liquid. Very important. fashion, shape always of divine activity, and the object, heaven and earth, mankind, the host of heaven, the heavens, the ends of the earth, north and south, and individual man. This definition gives recognition to a liquid changing form. The earth was enveloped in water. Genesis 1:2 will demonstrate it was the Ruach of Elohim, Yahusha, hovering above the waters. Strong's exhaustive concordance, bara, create, to create, select, feed as a formative process. Cut down and undo and make fat. I'm not sure what those don't really apply to this situation. Strong has stayed in agreement with the other sources. Interestingly, it also cites a formative process which can align with the accretion growth system seen in the other sources as well. A series of definitions have been accumulated that portray the idea of the creation process on the first cycle of creation as a beginning state of creation. This state of creation enlists a systematic approach of fine-tuning for a final inhabitable product such as our earth and ultimately our full universe. This has by no means been an exhaustive search, but it is a good starting point from which you are able to begin your own research. Please do not just accept what is written here, but take up the challenge and do your own research. We are to be Bereans and prove ourselves worthy of consideration for salvation, even though there is nothing we are able to do to accomplish that final goal. Our full dependence is on the light. Yahusha, he is the light. Summary thus far. The basic elemental substances for this earth had been accumulated into a localized zone known as the creation scene. Next, Genesis 1 verses 2, the formless earth. And the earth came to be formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the spirit of Elohim was moving on the face of the waters. And I'm going to ask you to note this phrase right here, came to be. We're going to focus on this very, very closely right now. Footnote, or the earth became. Verse 2 will be broken down into sections and analyzed for its original meaning that was intended, desired by the author and inspiration. Next, we're going to look at the KJV version of this same verse. Special attention for Genesis 1:2. The question is, does the KJV translation produce an accurate meaning of the original Hebrew language? And the earth was, that's what KJV has, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Charlene, can you note down slide 25? I would like to change that word God to Yahuah, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Do not mistake this as finding fault with the KJV. I was raised on the KJV. We studied it for at least a half hour every morning, and I have a great appreciation for the KJV. What I'm trying to do is point out that we need to be very, very careful with our sources, and we need to do our due diligence to find out what the Hebrew words say. A note about the Bible translation. Every translation has defects. Becoming familiar with the Hebrew language will aid each one in detecting these flaws. Keeping this in mind for the KJV, a further investigation is needed for the real meaning of the word yete, very poorly translated as was. Below is a detailed breakdown of the first half of Genesis 1, verse 2. And we see here, and the earth was. That is what we find in many of our translations. And I'm going to show you the definitions of why I put becomes here. We're going to be going through lots of definitions. Brad Scott, of Wild Branch Ministries, is a teacher of Hebrew, including Paleo-Hebrew, for 25 plus years. He writes this word, iethe, to become, has a direct relation to the proper name of Yahuah. This should not surprise us, as it was Elohim that was undertaking the creating. The etymological dictionary of the Hebrew language, iethe, to exist, happen, become, was or existed, came into being, became, it came to pass. Now we're going to need to pick out which one of these definitions is best suited of what the verse is telling us. And we're going to find that by the context. And John Parkhurst, he says, to be, exist, denoting the state of condition of being. Defining iethe. Compare the first four words of Genesis 1:2. And the earth was, KJV, and the earth came to be, the scriptures. What is the original word for was or came to be? Iethe, became, the interlinear scripture analyzer. This word is found in the various Hebrew translations online and in the Stone Edition Tanakh. Verification of the meaning given for iethe is going to be next. And here's the Brown, Drivers, and Briggs. Please notice what he says about this transitional action, the implications that it tells us. Here's the word, iethe, come to pass, to come about, come to pass, to come into being, to become, to be instituted, be established. These are a transitional action. It shows from one state of being into another state of being over a period of time. The Hebrew Lexicon by Barker, Niehi is cognate, or that's the same family of words, as iethe. And he says it is become, be done, and accomplished. Gesenius, Hayah, destruction, ruin, or disaster. Please note, it is very common for one Hebrew word to have exact opposite meanings, especially within the same family of words. Strong's Concordance, Hayah, to exist, be or become, come to pass, accomplished. And this is in the same family of words. Iethe, the transition from one state of being into another different state of being is very evident. The creation of the earth being the context here. If this word iethe was to mean an existing state of being as opposed to a transitional state of his existence, then we have a much greater controversy. And that controversy would be, we would have to accept that Yahusha, who is the epitome of perfection, which is an above and beyond our human comprehension, we would have to accept that he can create a highly imperfect creation, which would be completely devastating to his character. And my question to you is, our Creator, who is the epitome of perfection, can he create something that is a disastrous waste? And I'm going to leave that question with you, because we're going to be going through a lot more definitions, and I hope you'll think about that question very, very carefully. The summary thus far, the basic understanding for the terms was, came to be, has been covered through the Hebrew word ethe. Next, the formless earth, without form, and that is 84:14, chaos, and the word is tohu. And the earth came to be formless. Will the next part of Genesis 1 expose a highly temporary state of this earth's existence? Temporary? Considering Yahuah will be rebuilding or restoring his creation, whereupon he deems it good. The rebuilding action will be addressed later on in this study. Defining tohu, chaos, without form, 84:14. Some very important questions must be asked. With each and every definition in Genesis 1:2a, did our Creator, who is the epitome of perfection in every way, create anything that will profess a description of contamination on the first day of creation? In other words, was the first day of creation by Yahuah or Yahusha a failure? We will define form first. The interlinear scripture analyzer. Emptiness, waste, desert, chaos, confusion, vanity, nothingness, worthlessness, depth, deep, abyss, deep sea, primeval ocean. Think about those words very, very carefully. When Yahuah, well, we're going to see in a verse later where Yahuah says that he created this earth to be inhabited. Is emptiness inhabitable? How about waste? How about chaos? How about confusion? Are these things inhabitable? That is my question. Defining tohu, or tohu, chaos, continued. And here's from Strong's Concordance. To lie waste, a desolation, desert. Read this one slowly. A worthless thing. In the KJV, it says confusion, or an empty place, without form, nothing, waste, wilderness. And how about vanity? There's a verse in the scripture that Yahuah says, my words will not return to me in vain. So how can it be that on the first day of creation, he would create a worthless thing? Did he? Our question on creation's first cycle, did Yahuah create a waste, a desolation, a worthless thing, confusion, an empty place, a thing of naught, something in vain, a waste, or a wilderness? Isaiah 45:18 provides understanding. For thus said Yahuah, creator of the Shemayim, he is Elohim, former of the earth and its maker. He established it. He did not create it to be empty. He formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahuah, and there is none else. Defining tohu, more, without form, 84:14, chaos. The etymological dictionary of the Hebrew language. This is what's recorded on the first day of creation. And we remember there's that, changed from one state of being into another state of being. And here we find what it changed into. It was emptiness, it was waste, it was chaos, and it was confusion. It was vanity, nothingness, and worthlessness. That is the word that is recorded there. Parkhurst says it was without order. It was an unprofitable thing. It was vanity. Barker says this word means to be without form, order, or irregularity. It was a barren wilderness. And here's another lexicon. This is one from Gesenius. Formlessness, confusion, unreality, emptiness, vacuum, formlessness of primeval earth, of land reduced to primeval chaos. Is this what our Creator created on the first day of creation? The Brown Driver Briggs lexicon mirrors the same definitions. Jeremiah's vision for the end of time. Jeremiah 4:23. Do you want to read this, Charlene?
Sure. Jeremiah tells us, I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form, it was void, and the heavens, and they had no light. Interestingly enough, Jeremiah is looking in vision at the chaotic end of this earth's allotment in time. Well, how does this relate to the beginning of the first cycle of creation? And we need to remember that Isaiah has told us 7 times in his book, and you'll find this between chapters 40 and 48, that if we know the end, we will also understand the beginning. And a favorite verse of ours is Isaiah 46:9 and 10. So Jeremiah truly is an incredible witness. Have you noticed what's been going on here? With this study in Hebrew, we have already passed through hundreds of years. We've gone through different translations from different languages, but the Hebrew language is firm on the meaning and the idea of the word chaos, being translated as without form in verse 2 of Genesis 1. This idea is consistent and it is ready to provide full alignment within the scriptures. So what we're finding here is that in Genesis 1, verse 1, everything was perfect, beautiful, there was no problems. And by the time you get to verse 2, we have a complete opposite of what we had in verse 1. Something happened in verse 2 to the earth.
And we need to note that it's the Hebrew word definitions themselves that gives us this picture of what took place. It also gives us the picture that there was it changed from one state of being into another state of being. Okay, let's continue on. Thanks, Charlene. Summary thus far. The term without form is defined as confusion, emptiness, formless, and primeval chaos. Charlene, can you record slide 38, please? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next. The formless earth and void. That's the OT 922. Vacancy. Bohu. Now think about these words, tohu and bohu. That's the same family of words. So it's quite likely there's going to have a lot of definitions that are going to reflect closely to what each other means. And the earth came to be formless and empty. With the examination of the term void, will things get any worse than they are already? Defining bohu and void, 922, vacancy. The Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language by Ernest Klein. Emptiness, chaos, empty. And this one is just very, very strong in my mind. unconnected ruin. If that's not confusion, I don't know what is. Confused, mere void. Barker says empty and void. This one, emptiness of primeval earth. And this provides the same verse references as tohu or tohu, however you want to say it. And here's a reminder, okay, when we look at these emptiness, chaos, unconnected ruin, confused, mere void, desolation, but yet Yahuah tells us he formed it to be inhabited, for I am Yahuah. So how can it be that we have this place of unconnected ruin and a mere void, but he tells us, Yahuah tells us, he formed it to be inhabited? How can this be? And more on bohu, Brown Driver Briggs. Emptiness, void, waste. Strong's, and undistinguishable ruin. Emptiness, void. I think someone has their mic on. If we could have the mic taken off, that would be very good. Thank you. Is it possible this desolate waste of vanity, as documented in Genesis 1:2, which is preceded by a Hebrew term revealing a transitional event? Remember, that's that word ayete, where it says come to be or come to pass, has derived from our Creator in his absolute perfection? Did Yahusha produce this contaminated failure? And we're going to see more on that word contaminated. Do these terms relate to an inhabitable earth? Isaiah 45:18. Review. The first three Hebrew words translated to us as was, form, and chaos have been covered through various translations. Because of copyright rules, the different translations must different words to show their separation. The Hebrew text does not support this confusion. The Hebrew has been preserved by Yahuah for our advantage to study and decide for ourselves who it is that we want to give our allegiance to. The next word under investigation is darkness. And I got to take a drink of water so I can pronounce this word correctly. Choshek. You got to get that cho in there. That's how I'm taught to pronounce it. Choshek. This is a very, very highly interesting word. This word is a game changer. For those of you that don't know that there is two different types of darkness recorded on the first day of creation, I would like you to open your ears and listen to what this word has to reveal to us. Here's Genesis 1:2 in A. And the earth was, there's that word became, without form, that's the chaos, and void, there's the vacancy, and the darkness, that's the choshek, was on the face of the deep. Summary thus far. The word bohu reflects the definition of tohu very closely. Double emphasis means pay attention. Next, Genesis 1:2a. The formless earth and darkness, right here. OT 28:22. Darkness. Choshek. And the earth came to be formless and empty, and choshek, darkness, was on the face of the deep. And the reason why I'm emphasizing choshek is because the other word for darkness that we're going to see in a little bit is an entirely different word. Because of the seriousness of this study, it is imperative to first investigate the term face of the deep. We're going to have a short interruption to examine face of the deep first. Face of the deep, 84:15, abyss, tohu, And the earth came to be formless and empty, and darkness, choshek, was on the face of the deep. Abyss must be scrutinized first, so that when choshek, darkness, is considered, we'll know exactly what kind of darkness it really is. Defining tohu, abyss, Brown Driver Briggs lexicon. Deep depths, deep places, abyss, the deep, subterranean waters, abyssus, primeval ocean, abyss, the grave. Once again, traces of the beginning are seen in the ending, exactly as Yeshayahu prophesied. See Revelation 9, 1-3, and the bottomless pit. So the beginning, the very first day of creation, has a direct connection to Revelation through Revelation 9, 1 and 3. And that is a very good reflection on what Isaiah says. If we want to know the ending, we must know the beginning. Why did he say that? Because the ending is going to show us what is going to be happening, or the beginning is going to be showing us what happens in the ending. And here we have the abyss, direct connection to Revelation. You might notice that this word deep, tohu, has the same three letters as the Hebrew word for without form, chaos. But it has a mem letter added on to the end. Yes, Hebrew is read from right to left. This word, tohu, is of the same basic family of words and contains some of the root meanings, but with the water substance added on. That water substance is the mem letter. I'm not going to delve into the meanings of this word because we have already seen the basic meanings. However, one very interesting and very important word seen in the definition is the word abyss. We're not going to look in the details here, but the word abyss at the beginning has a direct connection to Revelation at the end, involving the domain of who? Of Satan. Is there a connection here? That abyss at the end is the domain of Satan. Keep that in mind. To understand the connection of the abyss at creation to the word abyss in Revelation 9:1-3, where it is called the bottomless pit, consider the study titled Creation's Chronicle. That is a very in-depth, detailed study that we have on creation. Okay, now let's look at choshek, darkness. The terms subterranean waters and abyss are very closely connected to the term darkness. And darkness, 28:22, darkness, choshek. There are two different Hebrew word numbers for darkness that must be carefully investigated. And darkness was. That darkness is choshek. Tet, shin, kaf. Two different Hebrew words for darkness. They are choshek, if I can emphasize that enough, which is the first word for darkness as recorded in Genesis 1:2. And leil is the second word for darkness as recorded in Genesis 1:5. What is the difference between these two darknesses? Why are they recorded there?
That's huge.
Yes, that is an understatement, Mario. It is huge. It's massive. We will certainly be looking at both terms and from where the Leil darkness derived. There is no disputing that Yahuah at one point also created this very type of affliction, the choshek darkness, later on in the scripture stories events, but for it is most definitely recorded there. However, the evil contamination portion of the choshek darkness was not there. This study will be sticking very closely with Genesis 1:2, considering the context written in the first two verses, at which time we will progress from there to verses 3 and 5. What and or who is the origin of this choshek darkness? May I suggest, when we determine the type of substance describing the choshek darkness, we will easily be able to determine its origin by scriptural testimony. Brown, Drive, and Briggs. Choshek, darkness, obscurity, darkness, secret place, darkness, hence spoken of as a dark place of Hades. For those that are unsure about the word Hades, that is likened to hell or to an underground prison. Let there be darkness over the land of Mitzrayim, even a darkness which is felt. This is one time when Yahuah used this choshek darkness. At midnight, when the firstborn of the Egyptians were taken out, that was one type of the darkness. But there was another time when he brought the darkness over the land, and that darkness was felt that they couldn't even see their hands in front of their faces. It was a brutal, brutal, brutal darkness, and it is recorded as a choshek darkness at that point. It would be good to inquire of yourself as we go through these definitions. Did Yahuah create this state of affairs intending upon a perfect, inhabitable creation? Was Yahuah's experiment of creation a disaster or a failure? Here is Strong's definitions for choshek. OT 2821. This is the root, chashek. Literal darkness, figurative, misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, wickedness. This is what was found on the first day of creation in the word choshek. Did Yahuah create misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, and wickedness on the first day of creation, and then tell us he created it to be inhabitable? Isn't that a severe controversy? The etymological dictionary of the Hebrew language, choshek, darkness, obscurity, secret place, ignorance, evil, sin. Those are pretty serious definitions to be created in an inhabitable creation on the first day. Did Yahuah place these definitions there for us to be living in an inhabitable first day? Or is the definition that shows a transformation from one point of being into another point of being with these words following it, is that what we can understand? Is that what's written in the Hebrew language? Here's what John Parkhurst: to impede action or motion, to refrain, restrain, keep back, stop. Here is Barker and his definitions: to impede, Does that sound like your creator? Keep back, refrain, restrain, withhold, to be dark, darkened, darken, and obscure. Here's Gesenius, and these are virtually the same. Withhold, refrain, keep back, keep for oneself, hinder, hold in check, and reserve. The reason I have brought these different lexicons out and I know it's difficult to go through all these definitions, but I want to avoid people telling me, oh, you took one place, one source, and you're making a belief structure on that. And this is why I'm trying to go over these different definitions, because I would like you to see that this is not just a single source or two sources. This is multiple sources in the Hebrew language. I also go back to the Paleo with this also, and it shows the exact same meanings. Question: how many of these definitions describe the character of our Creator and Mashiach? We must consider these definitions when reading the context of the next few verses to determine what this choshek, darkness, actually was. Not just a few specifically chosen definitions to facilitate our present belief structure, but every definition must be considered carefully throughout. Soon we're going to see in Genesis 1:3 that Yahuah took some very specific actions that directly pertained to this choshek, darkness. The profound results will last through the remainder of eternity. It is this choshek, darkness, that encapsulated the earth. Creation transitioned from a perfect state in verse 1 to a vile state in verse 2, as recorded by Moshe in tohu and bohu, chaos and vacancy, at the beginning of verse 2. Charlie, do you want to read this?
Mm-hmm. So our summary thus far, between verses 1 and 2, it appears that the earth went from perfection to undistinguishable chaos and ruin. Like, can you believe that? So next, we are going to look at the second part of Genesis 1:2. We call it 2b, and we're going to find a restoration begins here. We'll be looking at the word moving, 7363, which is flutter or rakaf, and we'll be looking at the word waters, which is 4325. By the way, this is actually dirty waters, which is mayem. So the verse says in the second part of verse 2, and the Spirit of Elohim was moving on the face of the waters. The action at the beginning of verse 2 was very negative, and the action at the end of verse 2 is going to be positive, because we have a restoration coming on board.
Go ahead, Charlene.
So we're not done with defining terms just quite yet. We're still working on that. In Genesis 1:2, the last part of the verse, we'll look at rakaf first, which is the word moved, and the Spirit of Elohim moved. It actually has the definition of flutter. We'll look at it. Rakaf, the primitive root, it means to brood, by implication to be relaxed, and then flutter, move, and shake. You can think of a mother hen fluttering over her chicks. Let's look at the word mayem, which is waters. Actually, I'm going to show you that it's wastewater. The remainder of the verse says, and upon the face of the waters. Waters is 4325. It's mayem. It's dual of a primitive noun, but used in a singular sense, water or figuratively juice. And you'll see I have a ... there. I did not choose, and Tim did not choose, between the two of us to put the rest of the definitions in that are in the Strongs. You can go look them up yourself. But basically, the idea is that this is a waste water. It's not clean, pure water. It is a wasting water. Like yuck.
Thank you for bringing that up, Charlene, because I was going to bring it up shortly too. There is some words in there that describes this type of water that is not very repeatable on this panel, or anywhere else for that matter. That water is definitely waste water. The Ruach flutters over the waste water, defining the action of the Ruach. In Genesis 1:2, the action of the Ruach HaKodesh was hovering or vibrating above the waters of the earth. Young's literal translation and the Ancient Hebrew Research Center calls this action fluttering above the waters. There is a scientific and proven fact named sonoluminescence that involves vibration applied directly to water. This vibration-induced action produces light.
Tim, can I just pop in and say something about this? Maybe before you turn the slide. You can go on to the internet and look up sonoluminescence. And I found a 4-minute YouTube that was very interesting about a lady that was singing in a very high pitched voice, very loud, across a wine glass that was half filled with water. And the stronger her voice got and the higher the pitch, it came to a point where there was a blip or a flick of light and the glass shattered because the vibrations of her voice are fluttering or coming over, fluctuating over the water. Actually, I don't know how to explain it. It's a lot easier on the YouTube, but it actually shattered the glass. So if you can think about Yahuah and the Spirit with his action fluttering over these waters, this vibration, the frequencies, that's what I want, the frequencies. And this is also how the walls of Jericho came down, was when they were marching around Jericho. And remember, Joshua said, everybody's to be quiet. And when I tell you to shout, I want you to shout. This is how the walls of Jericho came down, with these vibrations and frequencies. So this is really something to pay attention to.
You want to continue with this slide, Charlene?
Oh, well, okay. So what about these waters, the Mayim? And we will briefly touch on the waters. There are 2 words that are applicable to water, and they are by phonetics, shemayim and mayim. The shamayim has the prefix, I'm going to pronounce it as shah, I think that's correct, which directly refers to the heavens. This is the water in the heavens. The waters on the earth are translated from the word mayim. It is this word, mayim, that is seen in Genesis 1:2. 1:1 has the other word. It is upon the earthly waters that the Ruach HaKodesh was inducing this vibrating, cleansing action. The frequencies of him fluttering, the Holy Spirit fluttering over the waters, was creating a cleansing of this water on the earth. Well, the water needed cleansing, then obviously the water was dirty. It was a wastewater. And why was it a wastewater? How did it get that way?
Did Yahuah create wastewater as an inhabitable place for us to live? I'll just leave that thought with you. Brad Scott comments, Elohim redeems creation, beginning with the waters. Water is a picture of cleansing in judgment, in purification and salvation. Remember, the Ruach was fluttering above the waters. Why would Elohim need to begin redemption on the first cycle of creation with water? Why? Did the waters need cleansing that day? There is another very interesting aspect to this water on the earth. We have learned from the previous definitions accumulated in this verse that it is highly possible the earth was contaminated by violence of destruction upon the arrival of the adversary. And here's a verse from scriptures. And he, Yahusha, said to them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. And that is recorded in Luke 10:18. See also Revelation 12:4-9. Lightning hits severely. When it hits, it is destructive. Question. Was Yahusha present on the first cycle of creation? Why would I ask that? Is it possible that Yahusha was able to see what happened on that first day of creation? Was Yahusha in a position to observe the adversary fall from heaven and hit the earth with an impact described as lightning? In other words, was the impact of this event, is that what caused the contamination on the earth? Is that what caused the perfect creation to transform from a perfect creation into a place of waste, of a desolate waste contamination? Is this the event? Did Yahusha witness this event? Is that what he was relating to his disciples? Or can we just accept that Yahusha, who is the epitome of perfection, that he created wastewater, chaos, confusion, evil, contamination, and then told us that he created an inhabitable creation? Or is that statement confusion in itself? How destructive is lightning? Is it possible that the waters... Go ahead.
Yeah, can I just ask, I'm finding it difficult to follow what you're saying here. Just in light of my understanding of Genesis 1:1 would be that when God created the heavens and the earth, he created it, with, I suppose, as a blank canvas, but with all of the elements required to create life. And we see that life isn't introduced into the world because it isn't inhabitable at that point. So the first statement is like, I guess it's like, say, Tim built a house. And then verse 2 would be, he gathered, like, I don't know, he got the bricks together, or he did. And it's kind of like, so verse 2 is then going and describing the building of that house. So it's not necessarily in that order. Because if at the end of the day, God calls it good, and you're saying that there's been evil come upon the earth, I'm just not sure I'm following that sort of line. I thought that we didn't really hear of Hasatan until the garden. Do you know what I mean? And so this is the earth that's been created and prepared, ready for the inhabitants, which obviously was when man was put in. So I have no problem saying all the material, everything was there. The waters were muddy. I agree with that, because that's how it's pictured, that is created, is void without form. But it's got everything there needed for the rest of creation, that transformation to, what you're saying. I agree with the Holy Spirit hovering, purifying the water. Got day 2, he separates land and water and things like that. So I'm just not sure where you're heading with this one at the moment. I don't know that I follow it, if you know what I mean.
Well, I do appreciate what you're saying. I really do, because I was at that point also. And what I would ask at this point is I would ask that you let me get through these slides, and we can discuss this afterwards. I would like to hear your take on how that the Hebrew words that describe utter contaminated evil, desolation, and confusion, how that came to be. And I would be interested to hear how you describe that.
Yeah.
But for right now, I would like to get
I'm about to.
to, and we can discuss this later if that's okay.
Yeah, I've got to bail now because I've got to go into my my Sabbath meeting now with the guys that I normally meet with. So I'm going to listen to it later and maybe just come back and maybe I'll just email you during the week, Tim, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, if you want to get a hold of me, you and I can come on to our own little panel on Zoom, and we can discuss things at another time. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I will listen to the rest of it, and hopefully, get on the same page. But thanks very much. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil, for sharing that. I think many of us have had and feel or thought the same thing. I think at this stage, all we've done so far is try to dissect some Hebrew words. But so
yeah, Mario, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how it goes.
yeah.
I'm one of those who agrees with Neil. While I believe that it was void and formless and all of that, I don't know about it being evil. And so I kind of, that's kind of taking me back. So if there's a further conversation, I'd like to be part of it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Me too.
Yep. Very good.
Okay.
May I interject something really quickly?
Sure.
I think we think of time as chronological, and sometimes it's not, between verses, it's not exactly chronological. So there could be a vast amount of time between verse 1 and verse 2. So something could have occurred between the two verses that we don't understand yet at this point.
The question I would have for you at that point then is when the manna come in the desert, when Yahuah gave the pattern of the 7 days or the 6 days to pick manna and the 7th day Sabbath that followed it, how long was there between the first and second days of picking manna? Because that is the exact pattern that he followed. And these patterns continue all through the scriptures. I have never found a long distance between number 1 and number 2. I just can't discover that.
Yeah. I can kind of understand what Victoria was saying, in as much as that, before he had to do anything, he had to create space, and then he put matter inside the space. And then
I was kind of asking a question. Could that be why it's difficult to understand? I didn't form it in a thing of a question, but that's what I was saying. Could it be that? But it doesn't sound like it is.
My question has nothing to do with.
Excuse me. Can we get through?
My question has to do with the use of the term evil or, contaminated.
Okay. I would like to get through these slides, because there's other thoughts that has to be passed and we have to cover.
Okay.
I apologize. Go ahead.
No need for apology. No, none whatsoever. But some of the questions will be answered as we continue. If I could get through this, it would be very good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Is it possible that the waters could also have been contaminated at that time as well?
Anything's possible.
There is solid provision within the Hebrew definitions for very polluted and or contaminated water right in Genesis 1 verse 2. Because this is very much a skeleton study of Genesis 1 to 5, the details can be read in Creation's Chronicle, where it is explored in an interesting way. Summary thus far: from perfection to chaos to cleansing. Next, restoration of light. Let there be light, which is 2:16 or, and Genesis 1:3. And Elohim said, let there be light, and there was light. Psalms 104:30. Thou sendest forth thy spirit, and thou renewest the face of the earth. Very interesting word. Thou renewest the face of the earth. We need to pay close attention here. Yahuah has brought light to exist. However, this time it was not created. Back in verse 1, we are clearly told that Yahuah created, bara, the earth and the heavens. Here, once again, for a reminder, are the definitions of bara. Created, to create, to shape, to form, always with Yahuah as subject, to shape, to fashion, to create, used of heaven and earth, used of individual man, used of new conditions and circumstances. I should have had this highlighted, used of new conditions. The next usage, oops, I accidentally changed that. The next usage after Genesis 1:1 is found in Genesis 1:21 with the creation of the breathing wildlife.
I can't have no picture.
Then what does this word, let there be, Yehi, mean? If Yahuah did not create the light at this moment, what did he do? And here's Brown Driver Briggs lexicon. Let there be, become, and this is the word Yehi, to be, become, come to pass, exist. These are all saying close to the same thing. Come to pass, to come into being, to be instituted, to be established. Genesis, or Gesenuus, Yehi, to become, to be made or done. There are many more explanations of this word and the cognate words to be studied in this lexicon and others. They all expose a gathering or assembly of substance already in existence to form something. Only a few examples are printed here. The idea of the light being created in verse 3 does not exist. Not in the original Hebrew. I changed my slide again. The word for create, bara, does not exist in verse 3. In reality, the word bara, to create, is not seen again until verse 21, where the sea creatures and birds were created. Bara is the same word as seen in verse 1, where Yahuah created suddenly. Let's read Isaiah 48:3. Can someone read these for me, please? First two, there's the same verse. I would just like you to see the different versions. If someone could read that, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Isaiah, go ahead.
Isaiah 48:3. I have declared the former things from the beginning, and they went forth out of my mouth, and I showed them. I did them suddenly, and they came to pass. Isaiah 48:3. I have declared the former things from the beginning, and they went forth out of my mouth, and I made you hear them. Suddenly I acted, and they came to be. Yahuah did not take years of time to create the universe. Every base element needed to give the final details of creation was bara, created, or that very first day of creation in Genesis 1:1. Note, a finished product may have numerous base elements in its final makeup. Again, refer to Genesis 2:5 to understand the final state of existence was not yet achieved.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Allow me to submit to you that the light was also contaminated, just as the primeval substances which were to form the earth were contaminated. We should recall that Lucifer was the bearer of light in heaven. Lucifer had and still has control over light. I have personally seen that myself. And if anybody wants an explanation of that, feel free to ask me. It is fully conceivable through the original Hebrew manuscripts that just as the earthly substance was polluted, Satan's intent and purpose was to also destroy the light, if he could. Yahuah had to restore and or rebuild the light. We are not told the details on how this was done, just that it was accomplished. Although we do have a hint of how it was done, and that's when the Ruach was fluttering above the waters. As we know, through sonoluminescence, that creates light. Moving forward to Genesis 1:4. And Yahuah saw the light, or that it was good. Upon inspection, Yahuah found the rebuilt light, or to be excellent. And Elohim divided the light from the darkness. That darkness is 28:22, choshek. Yahuah separated light from the choshek, darkness. The action is clear. The question is, why must there be a wall of separation between Yahuah's perfect creation, light, and this evil choshek, darkness, that had insidiously enveloped the newly created earth? Here are some questions that require answers. What characteristic was encased within the choshek, darkness, that Yahuah rejected, not wanting it to be affiliated with his pure light? And I want you to think about this next one very carefully. If Yahuah had created this choshek, darkness, as the very first act of creation, then what caused it to become, that's that word iete, more undesirable if it had already been created by Yahuah as an undesirable entity? What would make that, if he created in one position or in one state where it was very undesirable, what would cause it to become more undesirable, is what I'm asking. Yahuah told us in Isaiah 45:18 that he created the earth to be in an inhabitable state, not to be a state of mass confusion and contamination. Isaiah 45:18 again. For thus saith Yahuah, creator of the Shemayim, he is Elohim, former of the earth and its maker. He established it. He did not create it to be empty. He formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahuah, and there is none else. What transitional event placed this unsolicited envelope upon the earth? Understanding that we experience a darkness at night, what is it about the darkness after dusk that is acceptable to Yahuah? From where and when did this acceptable darkness arrive? When Yahuah separated his light from the darkness, was there another development that was also acceptable? We are given the answers to these questions on condition of us accepting the word as it is written. Let's continue with Genesis 1:5a. And Yahuah called the light Or, the day Yom, and the darkness Choshek. He called the night Leil. Yahuah named the light that was restored in Genesis 1:3 Yom, or in English, the light season. The cleansed Choshek, darkness, Yahuah named it Leil, or night, as we know it today. Let's take a real careful look again before anyone jumps up and down, waving their hands in the air to exclaim, there it is, see, God created the Choshek, darkness. Yes, a God contaminated the earth and its atmosphere. The question is, which God introduced this darkness that was not acceptable for the pure light of Yahuah to be joined with. Amos 3:3. Can two walk together except they be agree? Let's look at the example of Noah, Genesis 6:8. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahuah, Genesis 6:9. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with Elohim. Yahuah preserved Noah. He did not separate him from life. What about Abraham? And it came to, or Genesis 17:1. And it came to be when Abram was 99 years old that Yahuah appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be perfect. We clearly see a scriptural example of a righteous requirement for being connected with Yahuah. What was it about this choshek darkness that caused Yahuah to separate it from his pure light? On the graphic of slide 70, I hope you noticed the introduction of another entity of the absence of physical light named Leil. If you will notice, Leil, the acceptable darkness, was a product of having separated the pure light from the choshek darkness. The choshek darkness does have, in the Hebrew language, provision within the definitions for the acceptable substance of Leil darkness to be removed from inside of this contaminated choshek darkness. We are going to look at the definitions once again for a reminder. Choshek darkness has these positive components: literal physical darkness and obscurity, to be dark, darkened, and obscure, which is what we appreciate in our night seasons. It is these definitions, these characteristics that Yahuah would have used when he put the darkness over the land of Egypt. And when the darkness come when Yahusha was on the cross. But this word choshek may also contain misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, wickedness, secret place, ignorance, evil, sin, to impede action or motion, to refrain, restrain, keep back, stop, withhold, to impede, keep for oneself, hinder, hold in check, and reserve. Now we need to look at the definitions for the Leil darkness. This will help us realize exactly what was separated from the choshek darkness at the same time that Yahuah extracted his pure light from this evil contamination. Leil. Notice the darkness and obscurity has now been cleansed by separating it from the choshek darkness and renamed by Yahuah as Leil. How is it even remotely possible that Yahuah would simply rename the choshek darkness to a fully acceptable Leil without making some significant changes? Here are the definitions for Leil. Night, night of gloom, protective shadow. The etymological dictionary. Whoops, I changed my slide again. Night, at night, nocturnal, interlinear, just says the night. John Parkhurst, Leil, not as a verb, but the idea is evidently to wind, to turn or move round, or out of a rectilinear course. The night, the deviatrix. We are informed by Moses in Genesis 1:3 that God said, let light be, and the light was, verse 4, and God saw the light, and that it was good, proper to perform the important offices intended for it. And God divided the light, and God divided between the light and between the darkness, reciprocally changed the conditions of the celestial fluid by his own immediate power, as the sun and moon afterwards mechanically did and still do. And the Hebrew lexicon by Barker just says the night. Here's one on by William Gesenius. Night, opposite day, within one whole day. Strong's exhaustive, a twist away from light. Night, night season. Okay, we have seen many differences or definitions of Leil. Interestingly, these definitions have not reflected the idea of evil contamination seen in the word choshek, which is misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, wickedness, secret place, ignorance, evil, sin to impede action. And I've read these before, and you can read them yourself. Again, this is the definitions that come from the Hebrew words, that come from the Hebrew letters within the words themselves. And this is one of the definitions that are recorded within many, many lexicons. It is these evil contaminated characteristic traits of choshek that Yahuah separated, in turn applying his purification to the newly formed identity, our night season, known as Leil. And there is a very irregular shape or very unformed picture of choshek. This Hebrew word for night, which was purified and extracted by purification of separation from choshek, as mentioned in Genesis 1:5, is fully acceptable for our existence on this earth. Friends, I must remind you, many events had taken place during the first light season of creation. Creation, verse 1. And here's 4 separate events that happened on the first day. There's that choshek, darkness, chaos, verse 2. There's the light that was restored in verse 2b. In Genesis 1:5, the evening still had not arrived at this point, nor had the first night season come to fruition. The light was titled day. The cleansed choshek, darkness, was titled Leil, night. Yes, the night season was given a name, but their fruition had not yet been realized. That information will be investigated in the next portion of this study.